Welcome to Writer Spark, the podcast with tips and tricks about fiction writing. I'm your host, Melissa Bourbon, national best-selling author, developmental fiction editor, writing coach and instructor, and founder of Writer Spark Academy. Wherever you are on your writing path, Writer Spark has tips, tricks, and lessons for you. If you enjoy the Writer Spark podcast, please like and subscribe wherever you might be listening from. It helps others find our content. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining me. Today, my guest is V.M. Burns, also known as Valerie. She's the author of 4 different mystery series with a 5th one coming up that she's going to talk to us about, including the Mystery Bookshop, the Dog Club, the R.J. Franklin, and the brand new Baker Street Mysteries. She's so accomplished. She is also an adjunct professor at the popular fiction program at Seton Hill University in Pennsylvania, and she has a day job like so many we writers do. Get ready for Valerie Burns. Today our topic is writing diverse characters in fiction, which applies to any kind of fiction, not just mysteries. And it's such an important conversation. So settle in, grab something tasty, and get ready to ignite your writer spark. Valerie, thank you so much for being here with me today on my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about your books. I like to start with an author's origin story. I always think it's so interesting to hear how other people got into this crazy business that we've chosen to get into. So what was your path to publishing like?
Well, I have a lot of friends who they had dreamed of being a writer their whole life, and they wanted to, they have stories they wrote as children. That's not my story. I don't know that I ever necessarily dreamed of being a writer because I kind of thought writers don't make any money. I'm like,
True.
I know, right? So I thought I want to do something else. I just want to read books. So I read a lot. I read a lot of cozy mysteries. I fell in love with cozies. I love Agatha Christie. I'm a huge Agatha Christie fan. And, over the years, as I was writing or reading books, I thought, boy, I wish somebody would write a book about. Bloop, bloop. I wish someone would write a book about, I'd love to read a book about, and I just had this long list that just kept growing and growing and growing. And no one was writing these books. And, one day I thought, well, maybe I should try my hand at writing those books because if I want to read it, maybe somebody else does too. And so I started writing a mystery because those are what I love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I, read the majority of the time. And I realized it's a lot harder than it looks. When you read a book and you can finish it in a day or 2 days, and you're like, boy, that was fast. Or, especially when you read and you're like, well, they should have done it like this, or I don't know why they did that. That's, whatever. But, when you actually have to sit down and put a beginning, a middle, and an end, and, get 70,000, words. I wrote my book, and actually, I first started trying to write screenplays, and I thought if I could just sell a screenplay, sell a script, afford to quit my job, and then I can write. And that's if you ever are just waiting for the planets to perfectly align, waiting to hit the lotto so you can become a writer, good luck to you. That's generally not the way it works, and that was not my path.
Right. I doubt
So,
that it's really anybody's path. Maybe
right,
one or two lucky people.
exactly. It's about same, chances that you have of, I don't know, getting hit by lightning or something, or hitting the Powerball is, it's work. You have to, work at it. And I realize if something's important, you take the time and you make time for it and you just do it.
Not only making time for the craft itself or for whatever it is you're interested in, but to learn how to do it and to do it well and to continue to grow, especially in the field that we're in writing. We're never just complacent and saying, okay, I'm a writer, this is as good as I'm ever going to get. I mean, I think that most of us try to continue to grow and just become better at what we do.
Exactly. I mean, I have bookshelves and bookshelves full of, craft books on, writing, how to write the first 5 pages, how to write the first 10 pages, how to write, a damn good mystery, how to write,
Yeah.
fiction, how to write, killer fiction, there's just how to write cozy mysteries. And you keep reading and reading and reading because you want to get better. You want to learn and develop and grow. So I got a lot of books. I went to workshops and I got so many rejection letters, I could wallpaper a room.
Oh no. Yeah, I'm with you.
So I decided I'm missing something. And I decided to research writers that were successful that I admired to see what did they do.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those writers was Victoria Thompson. I'm a huge fan of her writing, and so I look in the back of her book at her bio and I read that she's a professor at Seton Hill University in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
Which you are too.
Well, now at the time, I already had one master's degree. I didn't want another one. I didn't want to go back to school. I just wanted to maybe audit one of her classes and learn.
Mm-hmm.
And it really wasn't that far from where I was living at the time. I lived in Indiana and I couldn't audit. So I ended up actually applying to the program and I got in and I got my master's in writing popular fiction, an MFA from Seton Hill. And I got to learn from people like Victoria Thompson. All the instructors are published authors, and so for me, that helped me to understand. Even when I was getting rejection letters, and for the few rejection letters that you get where they give you feedback,
Right.
I realized I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't understand. I didn't understand things about deeper POV or, all of the concepts that agents and editors are looking for. And I didn't know how to do what they wanted me to do. For me, I don't think that every writer needs an MFA to be a published author. I do not. I think that for me, that's what worked. So my path after I had written a book and been not successful with getting it traditionally published, I decided to pursue additional education and I went and got my MFA. And that really unlocked, because it made sense
Mm-hmm.
then. The things that they're saying, it made sense. And I was able to um, write my thesis. And actually my thesis novel is not the first book I sold. I wrote another book after I graduated because I had two ideas of books that I wanted to write, and the second one was The Plot is Murder, which was the first book that I got published, and that was the book that I got nominated for the Agatha Award. As you write, you learn.
Yes.
I think my current books are better than my first books, and
Yeah.
I think you probably have the same thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I'm getting the rights back to my very first series, and I'm thinking I need to go back and really revise them because I'm a better writer now, 29 books under my belt. And, so I would say the last half are probably a lot stronger than those first five. So yeah, I think that we are always growing. And as a teacher, I taught middle school and high school, and now I run Writer Spark Academy and I have online courses. And as a teacher, you're always learning too. And that's one of the things that I love actually about teaching is that it forces me to be more critical, to think more critically about the writing process or whatever it is I'm teaching. But now I'm just teaching writing. So to think more critically about the writing process and how to teach it, and I have to really understand it in order to be able to teach it. And so that's, to me, that's a real perk, because it's another way that I get to continually keep learning and I think growing in my craft.
Yeah, I have, since you mentioned that I'm a instructor now in the writing popular fiction program at Seton Hill, which I am, and I find that it's a low residency program, so we're only on campus twice a year for 1 week, twice a year,
Mhm.
and I'm inspired by the students who are writing new things and they're wanting to get published and they have all these ideas, and some of them are so far fetched and I'm like, wow, how creative, that's awesome. But
Yeah.
every time I go to residency or I read stories, I'm like, that's so creative and different, and that's, it just inspires me to want to be more creative and to push the limits, I guess,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
not only the genre but also my own writing and
Mhm.
what I do and how I do it.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not just about making it more complicated, but with the plot is murder. That was for me. It was a way that I was stretching myself. So prior to that book, I'd always written in first person.
Mhm.
And it's easier in first person because you're in one person's head and you don't have to think about the others. And I wanted to try writing in third, and so in that book there's a story within a story. So
Yes, so
the
complicated, and I don't know how you did that. That's, yeah, it's really cool.
well, it was, it was great. I thought this is the kind of book I'd want to read.
Mhm.
So I didn't think about at the time how hard it would be to write it, wanted to read something like that. So I thought the story that Samantha Washington, my main character, is in first, but the story she's writing is in third. I could stretch myself a little bit and try something new without having to write an entire full book in,
And
third
and
person.
not only that, but it's historical. What she's writing is historical. So
Yeah.
you have the whole added complexity of writing, okay, first person contemporary and then third person historical. And I know from talking to you, so we know each other, that you're a big what do you call it? Fan of England. Right? What's the
What
word?
is it? Anglophile, I guess, or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. I don't know. But I do. I love British history. I love the research. I can get lost. I can go down a rabbit hole and spend hours looking up what kind of, I don't know, radio programs were popular in 1939 Great Britain, because they
Yeah.
may not be the same ones. I can't even tell you how much time I spent trying to understand cricket. You know,
Yeah.
I made a reference to somebody playing cricket, and I thought, oh, well, I can put some details about cricket in there. I must have spent weeks. I actually like researched and watched cricket on TV, and then I interviewed someone that I know who actually plays cricket, and I still don't understand cricket.
And
So,
all of that time for probably one line of
right,
detail.
exactly. It's not integral to the plot at all, and I
Right.
eventually just changed it to, and he plays cricket, and I kept going because it didn't matter. I can get lost in it, but it is an opportunity to grow and to stretch myself and to learn and develop. And so, your point about continuing to grow and develop as a writer, it's a continual process. Learning is not a one time event. You don't publish a book and say, okay, now I know it all, because you
Right.
don't.
Yeah, that used to just kill me as a teacher, middle school teacher, high school teacher, and then, having had kids in elementary school and all the way through. Writing was taught the years it was tested. And
Mm.
the years it wasn't tested, it wasn't taught. And that killed me because I kept trying to get people to understand in my school, you can't learn writing in a year. It's a process that you build upon, and you're continually developing it. And you start with these skills and then you add and add and add and add and add. So, and it's the same idea with us as writers. We, write this fabulous first book. and our second book is going to be even better, hopefully, ideally, because we're continuing to, to go to workshops and to talk to, I think that the writing community, but in particular the cozy mystery community is wonderfully accepting and nurturing of one
Yes.
another. The people that I've met along the way, my first book came out in 2008, and I didn't know so much. And all of the people that I met were so generous with their
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
and with their knowledge. And, I think that's just invaluable.
I agree. I have met so many people within the cozy mystery community who really try to support and help. And it was such a big difference from screenwriting.
Hmm.
When I went to workshops and seminars on screenwriting, it was very closed. Like you go to you spend a week or a day or however long at this workshop, and you're sitting next to people in line or you're talking to people, and it's like, so what are you writing? And they won't tell you because they're afraid you're going to steal their idea, and then they lose out. And my very first opportunity where I went to a workshop that was both books and screenwriting, it was just night and day difference because the book people were so open and, hey, what are you writing? I'm writing this book about, President Lincoln and he's gonna, slay vampires or whatever it is. And they're like, so what are you doing? And I was just so shocked. Like they're actually telling me what they're writing.
Yeah.
And, cozy mystery community, it takes it even a step further because, they're volunteering to do blurbs for your book, or they're offering you help, or, you can mention something like, hey, I need a poison that can kill somebody by the time they get to the first floor in an elevator. And they're like, hey, you know what? I got one for you. Or I know somebody who works with poisons who can help you, and you can't say things like that to just anybody.
No, indeed you can't.
But the cozy mystery community, and they are, inviting you to participate in their Facebook groups and their, blogs, and, hey, I got this, group, Book Warriors, that is going to, read, and we'd like to talk about your book or whatever it is. I have found that the cozy mystery community is just really supportive, and that's been great. And I think part of that is, I think you need to, if you want to be a writer, connect with people
Yes.
and, networking. And I know most writers I know are introverts, myself included. And so it's a little hard. But if you get involved with either like Sisters in Crime or Mystery Writers of America or some other association, there's usually groups where you can ask questions. You can, people are saying, hey, um, I have a website and I feature different authors every month. Anyone want to take July?
Yeah.
Or I'm on a blog with Mystery Lovers Kitchen, and they have guests and you just did one not too long ago. So thank
Yes,
you.
I did.
But it's very inviting and open, and that's been wonderful. I think it's been so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an amazing community, and I'm really happy to be part of it. And I'm an introvert also, and like you said, so many of us are. And so it's nice to be part of a community of like-minded people, but
Exactly.
people who we can talk about our craft. We can talk about writing till the cows come home because that's what we're
Exactly.
passionate about, right?
Exactly.
All right, so let's jump into the topic today. Well, one of the topics, because we're covering a lot of things, but I'd love to talk about creating diversity in our books. And this topic is really important to me. My husband is first generation Mexican American. My children are mixed, therefore. And when I first started writing, my first character is named Lola Cruz, and I wrote her and her family very much modeled after my husband's family. And I wanted her to be somebody that my daughter in particular, I have one daughter and four boys, but I wanted somebody that my daughter could really relate to, somebody who really embraced her culture, but also, lives an American life because that's what we do. And she doesn't read these books. Now she's 22 because she doesn't like the little bits of romance and sex that mom wrote. They're mysteries. They're PI capers, but, anyway.
Right.
I had a Latina editor actually who bought this series. And the greatest compliment I think I've ever received is from her. And she said that the way I wrote these characters was more authentic than most of what she's read. And I think that that's because I worked so hard not to use stereotypes, right? I worked so hard to just make well-rounded characters of, different cultures and races. And I've continued to add characters that are representative of the communities. I grew up and born and raised in California, and one of my series is set in central coastal California. California is incredibly diverse, and so I brought in characters to sort of mirror the diversity that is truly exists there, right? And but it's tricky because you don't want to create stereotypes, and you don't want to, you have to be careful not to offend in any way. And especially, I'm just here, a white girl, and do I don't want, cultural appropriation and all of that, which I think is a bigger factor now with my Lola Cruz series. It wasn't so much then. I didn't think about it. Now I think about it a lot. I don't want anybody to think I'm, capitalizing on their culture kind of thing. So anyway, I'd love to just have this discussion on how do you treat it with respect, and how important is it to create culturally diverse casts of characters in our books and in any books.
Yeah, no, I think what you said about the fact that you um, were in California, which is a very diverse community, and I have a nephew who lives in New York, in Brooklyn, and it's really diverse community. And I think that books and television should reflect the real world. It should reflect the community. So there are people of color. There are people with different religious beliefs than, I don't know, unless you live on a commune somewhere, you're going to encounter people who are a little bit different. And I think that those differences will enhance the writing. You don't want all of your characters to sound the same or look the same or be the same because it's pretty boring. You
Mm-hmm.
want the diversity that exists in the world, because of the diversity helps people to see things from a different perspective.
Right.
And I think that that is important. I think that it's also important to recognize that um, there's not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
So, the character in my new series, my Baker Street Mystery series, Maddie Montgomery, you know, she doesn't represent all black women everywhere. There's a vast difference of, African American culture, there's a difference in Latina culture, there's a difference in Asian culture, and you want to be respectful. You don't want to create stereotypes. I think that's where you run into problems.
Right. Right.
Is if you're going, I mean, my first people ask me sometimes, do you feel that people who are not black can write black characters? Like, this is a free country. You can write whatever you want to write,
Mm-hmm.
but just be prepared that you need to get it right. So
Yes.
if you don't get it right, if you write stereotypes, you're going to get some backlash. Just be prepared for it.
Right.
And it's really hard if you're not a part of that culture, because that culture is very diverse. So you can, write about one person, or oh, I have a friend who's black who read it, and that they weren't offended by this word that I used.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they don't represent all black people everywhere, right?
Right.
So it can be really, really tricky. And it's definitely something that I recommend Um, Definitely incorporating diversity. I think, though, that there are some stories that are best told by the culture that owns that story.
Right.
So if it's a story about, I don't know, Harriet Tubman, right? I would hope that someone who shares that culture can tell it, as opposed to someone who is not a part of that culture and doesn't necessarily have those same fears and beliefs and um, just
History, experiences. Yeah. Yeah.
ideas about it, right? Because it's their a part of their history, their culture, and it really frames a lot of the mindset and the thinking. So I would just say be careful, be inclusive, and do your research,
Yeah.
because if you get it wrong, that's where the problems are going to come. And I think, it's very easy to say, oh, well, I know someone who talks this way, so I'm going to incorporate them. But recognize that, do they talk that way all the time? Did you talk to them? Maybe you just got a snapshot of an
Right.
event and they were maybe mocking an accent or, using, certain phrases. And, the other thing is, even as a black woman, I'm amazed at how different black culture can be in different parts of the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, and I grew up in a medium-sized town in the Midwest. So my experiences, and I grew up with basically a middle class black family, a nuclear family. My parents were married for 52 years. And so, I don't necessarily write books about, black culture where you have, prostitutes or drug, deals and gangs. That
Yeah.
wasn't my
Yeah.
reality. So it's like
Yeah.
certain,
Yeah.
there are people who experience that, and so that's part of their story or their culture. And could I do enough research to maybe get it right? Probably. If I wrote it and I got it right, would I probably get away with it? Yeah. But if I am so totally different from that, then people are going to question my, I guess, ability to write it or whether I should write it. So just because you can write it doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, the authenticity. I know that was one of the big controversies with American Dirt when it came out
Yes.
for that
Yes.
very reason. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of
Mhm.
have mixed views on whether or not she should have written that book. And we talked about it with my husband's family, and and my husband, he's like, yeah, I mean, if he thought it was absolutely fine if she captured it authentically in his opinion. It's a story that's worth telling, but then there were certainly other people that did not feel that way. So yeah, so I feel like I have to be super careful when I re-release my Lola Cruz series for that reason.
Well, I think though that you definitely have the experience. You have the people in your life that you can write it, and I don't think too many people would question it. Maybe they were. They're always going to be,
Yeah,
haters. They're always going to
yeah.
be haters. So,
Well, you get those no matter what.
um, right. But I think, they're going to recognize too that you are being fair and you're not putting everyone in a stereotypical, box. And I think, I'm thinking, you brought up the American Dirt, and I'm thinking about the whole kind of blow up with the romance writers of America. I mean,
Yeah.
that's that kind of just sort of sunk the whole
Organization.
organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. So I guess it's, it is very tricky, but
Hmm.
it's certainly something worth doing. I mean, one thing that's interesting, I just submitted a book for a new series, and I included a character who's part of the LGBTQ community, and I hadn't done that. I mean, not being a part of the community, I'm sort of like, I don't know, I don't want to get anything wrong, I don't want to, upset anyone. And I thought, but in the interest of diversity, I
Yeah.
mean,
That's so interesting. Yeah, because I have a character in the last book in my book magic series, the Pippin Lane Hawthorne series, and she's part of that community. And I think we have to be careful not to just throw these characters in gratuitously,
hmm
just so we can say, "Ooh, I have represented this, this subgroup or whatever in my books," but to do it, with intention and respectfully.
right,
And I think that from our personal experiences, we maybe have that respect a little bit ingrained in us. And I have a nephew who's transgender, and what I have learned from him and from his mom and their entire experience changed the way didn't change the way, but rather just enlightened me. It like peeled back the layers of so much that is, somebody that's transgender has to go through, and
hmm
then the parent. So I just feel like we have to be really respectful and careful,
exactly,
and not just throw in these characters just to say we have a diverse cast, but to
right,
to recognize the and if we have a diverse cast, bring that culture in some way, and
hmm
honor it,
right.
which is what I've tried to do in my bread shop book, because I have some diverse characters in there, from different cultures and countries, and it's always about, honoring whatever it is they bring to the table.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it can also be education without beating people up over the head. Cozy
Mhm,
mysteries, we can they tend to be lighter, more
mhm,
humorous, yet we will include subjects that are important and heavier. But we're also mindful of what we're doing. So ultimately, we are writing mysteries. We are
mhm.
writing cozy mysteries, and that has to be the focus. There are other things that we may incorporate. I can tell you that, with my mystery bookshop series, where I have the story, the British historic cozy mystery that my main character is writing, it takes place at the start of World War II. And so there are elements of what happened, and I want to always be respectful of that that whole experience, and I did not want in any way to make it seem that I am taking it lightly, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
also writing a cozy mystery. So that balance is something that you need to make sure that you incorporate, and you never forget that the first and foremost of you're writing a mystery or you're writing a romance or whatever it is that you're writing, and then be respectful of any diverse characters, any other elements. I wrote, there's a character that I love in my book that I actually took from a real person, right? So in that book, I have a spy. There's a spy that really existed. I read this story and I just fell in love with this character. She was a an American who at she had her grandparents, I think, were French, and so at the start of World War II and everything that happened, she goes to France and she becomes a spy to help the Allies. And she had one leg. She was in an accident and she lost, her leg. And to me, she seemed like she would be someone who was fun
mhm.
because she had a wooden leg and she called it Cuthbert. And so
So
I
she
thought,
had
well,
a good sense of humor, and just,
right.
yeah, well adjusted.
But she was so good at what she did that at one point the Nazis had put a price on her head, wanted dead or alive, and she had to flee France. And in order to get out of the country, she had to walk. Like she had to get off all the trains because they were looking for her. And
They were
she
looking for the woman with the wooden leg.
exactly. And so they're not expecting her to climb over a mountain, right? Like, Sound of Music, we're going to climb every mountain. She did. And she got out of the country and came back and then continued to work. And, she wasn't caught or killed by the Nazis. But I worried about, I don't want anybody to think I'm being insensitive about a woman with one leg, but she's the one who called it Cuthbert. I'm
Right.
not the that was I just took that from the, her story.
And that's when you write a little foreword in your book explaining all of that, and the liberties that you've taken. Yeah, my new series that I'm working on that my agent's going to be pitching soon is based, the entire concept is based on a woman named Biddy Early, who was the last woman tried for witchcraft in Ireland in
Oh
like the
wow.
mid 1800s. And, so I'm her, the whole family that I've created are her descendants,
Yeah.
and so same idea that you just want to, you know, honor, respect the lives of the real people that you're representing. I've talked with Heather Redman, who writes the Charles Dickens mystery series, and
Hmm.
same idea. She's using this real person and has to be authentic historically, but then also to who he was, to the best of her ability. So
Right.
there are so many balls that we juggle as
Exactly.
authors, depending on what type of thing we're writing.
Exactly. And I think that, it's very easy to, look at a book with a dog or a cat on the cover and think, "Oh, well this is lightweight. This author didn't do any work." No, you have to do your research, you have to do your work cuz readers will email you and they will tell you everything that you get wrong.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got an email from someone, I think, in one of my dog club mystery series, and the guy said, you know dogs and you know mystery, but you don't know a thing about cars because I had gotten the name of the car, the make wrong. And so I was like,
Yeah, that happened to me too. I had a Volvo something or other, I don't remember, in my bread shop series. Talk about it very briefly, and it
right.
was the color. I had gotten the color wrong. That color wasn't around in that year.
Oh
And
my
so
gosh.
and a reader emailed me, to make sure that I knew. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
so when you reprint that book, you're going to change
Yeah,
the color of the car.
yeah,
And I'm thinking, it's amazing to me too how many things, you know, get past, as many times as we as authors review our books and
yeah,
read it and reread it and reread it, and then you give it to someone else to read and reread, and they didn't catch it, and then especially with like my The Plot is Murder, because it was the first book. I reviewed that like 5 times, and then I sent it to a friend who edited it, and she reviewed it, and then I sent it to my agent who edited it, and then I sent it to my editor who edited it, and then it went to a copy editor, and then it goes to your production editor for galleys, and we all missed you know we missed it.
yeah, yeah. I just talked recently with Nancy Newell, and it's so funny because she has a new series. I think it's the new series she was talking about, that she set in a Virginia town, I guess, and it was, same thing. All of these people read it, all of these people edited, and it was the copy editor who said, "Did you know that that's the same town that all the Friday the 13th books take place in?" And they're like, "Oh my gosh, we cannot have a light, romancy kind of a series taking place in the Friday the 13th."
Yeah, that'd be a problem. I don't think
Yeah, but
anybody's
nobody
gonna.
caught it until that one reader.
Yeah, I had my the dogs that are on the cover of my mystery bookshop series. Those were my dogs. They're both passed now, but um, Coco and Cash were their names. In the book, they're Snickers and Oreo.
So cute.
And Oreo was the male, Cash. And I was reviewing edits on a book, and I realized when we got to like the galleys, and I'm reading this through for like the very last time that you can make any changes. And I realized that at some point I stopped calling that dog Oreo and I called him Cash. And I think that my editor, he knows they were my dogs and he knows what my dogs' names were. And he missed it and we all missed it. But thankfully I caught it right then I go back and do a search and replace and make
Yeah.
sure. But yeah, it's amazing how, and I also turned in a draft and my editor's like, you realize that this character is the name of a real author that we have at Kensington. You're going to need to change that. I'm like, I had no
Oh,
idea.
well, you can't know everything. I mean, come on. But that goes to show you that, we are just so close to our own writing in so many ways that it's very hard to spot those things. That's why you need an editor.
Yes.
That's why you need copy editors. You need these other people because hopefully at some point somebody will,
Yes.
make a discovery or realize whatever it is. But
Before
yeah,
it gets to the reader.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so if we had to kind of sum up our conversation about uh, creating diversity in our books or writing diverse characters, do you have so let me back up a second. So you write 4 different series with Black protagonists.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
So you're kind of part of a small-ish group in the cozy mystery genre, would you say? And even
Oh, yeah.
even in publishing, I would say, and even I mean, you're part of the crime, what's the name of the organization?
Crime
Crime
Writers of
Writers
Color.
of Color. So it's a small group. So I know you started by saying you're not necessarily an expert, and yet what you write, it's breaking down doors for people, right? It's helping to diversify not
I
only
hope
our
so.
genre but publishing in general. So coming from that sort of perspective, could you kind of sum up a couple of tips for people who want to you know continue that good work, basically?
Yeah, I guess I would say make sure that you do your research.
Hmm.
Make sure that you are respectful of the culture and the community, and make sure you try to gain understanding. So so that I, I think we all come at things from our own lens, and sometimes you may think that people do things a certain way because of your background or your history or whatever, but you might want to just check and make sure. And I'll share that recently my sister and I were having a conversation with my niece, and and there's something that in one of my books I wrote that older black women, um, it's a sign of respect that you call them by their last name. um, I actually asked my niece, and she's my niece obviously is black. Her husband is not, and I asked her, what does he call my sister? Right, my
Hmm.
sister's husband called my parents Mr. and Mrs. Burns. They were married for 27 years before he died, and the whole life it was Mr. and Mrs. Burns. And I said, just out of curiosity, I don't remember hearing, you know, Drew mention, call my sister by name. I said, what does he call her? And she's like, well, he really doesn't.
Yeah.
And we talked about, how we were raised that for um, anyone who was older than us, for older black people, and she was sharing that at the school that she works in, there was an older man and she calls him Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones because they were older, and they were like, oh no, just call me Nancy or Mary or John. And that's not what we were raised to do. If someone
Yeah.
was older, you called them, and it was really considered a sign of disrespect to call an
Hmm.
older person by their first name.
And I don't think that's specifically a cultural thing because I was raised the same way, and I'm 57 6 now. And my aunt is, in her late 70s, and I still call her Aunt Judy. I can't not call her Aunt Judy,
Right.
maybe to my mom when we're just talking about it. But even then, and I have an Uncle Chuck, and it's always Uncle Chuck, and it
Right.
always will be Uncle Chuck, and my kids with their aunts and uncles, it's Tio Ugo, it's Tio Abel, it's Tia Soli, it's Tia Gloria, it's Tia Teresa. It's all, they're always, it's just it's their name, it's
Right.
just who they are. And it is that, that generational respect
Yeah,
that
so I
that
think it's generational. I think some of it may be culture and my sister and I come at it from the standpoint of, when you think about, slavery in the United States and how black women were treated and whatever. But I think also I noticed difference from I grew up in the Midwest. I now live in the South in Georgia. And I also noticed those difference regionally within the country, that there are things that I have people who are younger than me at work who call me Miss Valerie. And,
Mhm.
and I recognize that it was the way they were raised,
Yeah.
that they refer to, an older person by their, with a title. And, even if it's not, Miss Burns, then it's Miss Valerie. And so I think it's just a matter of making sure you do your research
Mhm.
and understand that it can come from different perspectives. So don't assume.
Right.
Check around and do plenty of research and talk to people and gain insight, and don't be too close minded, right? You want to be open minded so that if someone tells you something, oh no, that's not possible, that's not it, because I talked to, Mary, and she said it was perfectly okay to say it. Well, it might have been okay for Mary. It might have been okay
Mm.
for Mary living in the Midwest, but if people could be offended, you don't want to go there.
Right, right. And then I think also it's recognizing that you have a culture, but within that, or a race, but within that race or that culture, there is so many people come from so many different places, right? I grew up on the West Coast. Everybody was Mexican or, coming from South America. Here in North Carolina, it's Puerto Rican, it's Dominican Republic, it's Ecuadorian. One of my good friends here is Puerto Rican Ecuadorian. So culturally, I mean, like regionally,
Hmm.
right? Those are differences. You can't just group everything. My son dated for a long time, and they were engaged, and sadly that ended. But a black girl whose family is Jamaican. Her parents are
Hmm.
Jamaican. And so she was like, I'm not African American. Don't call
Right.
me, she's not saying that to us, but she's like, just in general, like that's not my experience, right?
Right.
I am from the Caribbean. That is my family's experience. So you can't just assume that because a person looks a certain way, or whatever, that they have the same shared experience or shared
Exactly.
history. Yeah.
Exactly. That you hit the nail right on the head. I saw an interview that Lynn Manuel did, and he talked about the um, how hard it is. You try to classify so many different groups of people with one label.
Yeah.
And, he's like, it doesn't offend me to have the Latinx, you know, category, but that's like 30 or 60 countries or whatever involved in that one word that you're trying to group so many different people. So you can't assume that, the Mexican experience is the same as the Mexican American experience, which is the same as the, Puerto Rican experience, or, just
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's so funny because my husband, first generation Mexican American, his parents immigrated here. His dad was part of the Bracero program, so he is a migrant worker. And my husband, Spanish was his first language until he's one of seven, all of them, until they entered school, and that's when they started to learn English. And um, he's fairer skinned. There's kind of a range in his family, but he's on the fair skinned side of things, I guess. but also like his parents had a different perspective about education. And so he has cousins that he grew up with that were more like the cholos, with the flannels and the bandanas and that whole thing. And my husband was trying to figure out his identity, so he tried kind of that on for size, and he wasn't Mexican enough for that, but he wasn't white enough to be white. So it's I think my daughter's going through this right now, actually,
Yeah.
to a great degree. And so her field, actually, that she's getting her degree in is, well, it's kind of, she's creating it herself, but it's essentially, it's equity, it's racial studies and equity. And, she's searching for her identity. So you have to recognize that too, that every person's experience is different and they don't fit into their own boxes,
Right.
So I mean, there's so many layers, and I think it's wonderful to try and make sure that we are doing service to that in our books,
Right.
and that do it well, respect each other. So I appreciate the conversation because I think it's so important.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just very hard. It
It
really
is.
is because
It's
it
so
is
nuanced and
so vast and there's no one right answer.
right. Yes. Right. So yeah. Well, your tips are excellent, and I think the bottom line is do your research and try to understand.
Yes,
You try to understand on as many levels as you can to be authentic and move away from stereotypes.
exactly.
Because those are always wrong.
And they're going to get you in trouble.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so tell me, what do you have coming up next? So you've got your brand new series coming out.
Yes,
No, just came out.
it came
The
out
first
in
one just came
August, the first book. And the eighth book in my mystery bookshop series comes out in just a few weeks. And I actually am doing a third series with Berkeley. So it's a new series and it will feature a bloodhound. So my thing is dogs. I love dogs. So there's always going to be a dog somewhere in my books. And so in the Baker Street Mystery series, I had a English Mastiff, and in my new series, a Bailey the Bloodhound Mystery, I think is what the series is going to be called. So
fun.
if yeah, I think that will release sometime next year. So those will be the three series. I'm gonna maintain three series. I actually will have five altogether, but I've ended one. I have one more book in my R.J. Franklin series,
Mhm.
and that will probably release sometime next year also. And then I'll just have my Baker Street Mystery, my Mystery Bookshop series, and my new Bailey the Bloodhound mystery series. So
You're just gonna have those.
just the three series.
Okay. That's quite a lot to juggle. Plus,
It is.
your Seton
Seton
job, and then
Hill,
your
yeah, and I got a full
legal
time
job.
job because we need insurance. So it's it's I stay busy, but I think my other tip, I guess, for writers is know you and know what works for you. There is no one stop, no one should thing fits all. One size does not fit all. What
Yeah.
works for one person doesn't always work for others. I know me, and I know if I don't write every day, I won't write for months. And that
It's
can be
easy
a
to get
problem.
out of the habit. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can find 5 million other things to do. I will watch TV, I will play Wordle, I will play every computer game I can. I will play with the poodles. I will find something to do or just, get lost on the internet. But if I write every day, I get in the habit of writing, and that's what works for me. So I have to keep going. But after about 3 to 4 months, I'm really sick of these characters in my head.
Yeah.
So I need to move on. So I have to, and I also know if I gave myself a year to finish one book, I would spend a year working on like the first chapter. I would write that chapter and rewrite that chapter and rewrite that chapter over and over and over again, and I would never let it go. And so having a deadline forces me to let it go. It's good enough for now, and
Mm-hmm.
then I can move on to something else without getting in out of the habit of writing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're that person that you need to, write and rewrite a sentence, then do you. This is what works for me, but it
Yeah.
doesn't work for everybody. I have a friend, Kelly Garrett. She is meticulous, and she plots everything out, every beat, every, you know, just everything. And she takes a year, maybe longer, to write a book, and I would be so sick of that book, and
Yeah.
if I had to spend that much time in it. But it's what works for her, and she's been very successful at it. So I think the key is figuring out what works for you and doing that.
Yeah, I agree. That's a theme that has come up quite a bit on this podcast in varying subjects, whether it's plotting or pantsing or, whatever it is, that there's not a right way and there's not only one way. And don't force yourself to try and do it somebody else's way. I've
Yeah.
done that and it never works. Right.
No.
And I feel frustrated and I'm beating myself up because I'm like, I couldn't plot, the way that such and such plots, but it's just not my way.
Mm.
And you just have to accept that.
And 29 books later, it's
That's
okay.
right. That's okay. Well, thank you. Thank you again so much for being here. This was a wonderful conversation and
No,
I
I
really
enjoyed
appreciate it.
myself. Thank you so much for having me and chatting with me. I always enjoy our conversations, so thank you.
I do too. I do too. Y'all, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you're like me and like bookish things, check out the Writer Spark Tea Public Store. Please remember to like and subscribe to this podcast. And if you like YouTube, you can check us out there as well and subscribe. Come back for more tips and tricks about fiction writing and learn more about our online courses at www.writersparkacademy.com. I'm Melissa Bourbon. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, happy writing.